We say hello to the great Howie, who was a Met fan back in '62. He's almost in a certain way, I know not nearly the player there, Howie, but because of the number, the way he bat left-handed, I almost look at him as the Met version of Mickey Mantle in the early '60s. Let's start with that first. Go ahead.
I think Eddie, you know what, Chris, I think Eddie did too, because Eddie grew up in the Bronx, as you probably know, and was a big Yankee fan growing up long before there were any Mets. Eddie was born in November of 1944, and Mickey was his guy, and they became friendly along the way, meeting each other at Mayor's Trophy games and spring training and the like. And believe me, Mickey was Eddie's idol.
Now, we got a couple things to do. First off, they sign him, and they send him out to L.A. in 1962 for, to be sort of get a feel what it's like to be a big leaguer. And his first game, you got Koufax pitching a no-hitter. He wasn't Koufax quite yet in '62, but he was good. And I guess he let Woodling, Casey Stengel, pinch hit in the ninth instead of Kranepool, so Eddie didn't get an at-bat against the lefty Koufax. I'm sure you know the story. Howie, help us out there. Go ahead.
Yeah, very well. He basically said to Casey, well, what am I getting into here when he's watching Koufax do what he did? I think, Eddie used to say he hit Koufax okay. I looked it up. He was .231 hitter against Koufax, but he hit some Hall of Famers pretty well. He hit Gibson really well. He hit Gaylord Perry really well. But, Eddie, remember now, played his first game, and he only had 6 at-bats at the end of the '62 season. He wasn't even 18 years old yet, and he was playing in the major leagues. And I don't know that people can appreciate the pressures that Eddie felt, not only in his career, but throughout his life. He never knew his dad. His dad died in World War II before Eddie was born. So he grew up without a father, but he was gifted athletically on the streets of the Bronx and was signed to a big contract. And so whereas there was no pressure on any of those Mets really for the first 6 years of their existence, the one guy who probably felt some was Ed, because he thought that he needed to live up to the bonus that he received and the fact that people were looking at him as potentially becoming the franchise's first homegrown star. And then imagine, Chris, you're 20, 21, whatever he was, and there's a sign, a banner at Shea Stadium that actually read, "Is Ed Kranepool over the hill?" I mean, it was tongue-in-cheek. It's the kind of thing you see on Twitter every day now. But he had to try to shrug that off and live up to the expectations. And it wasn't until later in his career that he did.
Yeah, he found a perfect role as a deluxe pinch hitter. Mets screw him up, Howie. I know he felt that maybe they didn't give him enough minor league seasoning in their attempt to find that homegrown star. Did they mess around with him too much and not give him enough minor league help? Let's talk about that for a sec. Go ahead.
They probably did. And I think Eddie not only felt that way, but his close friend and former teammate Ron Swoboda did as well. I mean, they were kids. They were babies when they came to the big leagues and had little, if any, minor league experience. But one thing people don't remember, or at least most fans wouldn't, and this is a testament, I think, to Eddie's character, is that, yeah, he was part of the '69 team and an integral part of it. And he hit a home run in Game 3 of the World Series in 1969. But what you might not realize was that Gil Hodges sent him down to the minor leagues the next year. In 1970, Don Clendenin, who was platooning with Ed in '69, had a great year, drove in 97 runs, and Eddie found himself in the minor leagues during the summer of 1970 and had to wonder, I'm sure at times, if he had a future with the club. But he bounced back from that, and from 1971 on became a much more productive hitter and a bona fide all-around big league player.
I didn't realize he didn't like Gene Mauch, because Mauch didn't get him into the game in the '65 All-Star game, and he had a little that in his craw the rest of his career. I wasn't aware of that. And Mauch, of course, '64. I don't know why it was. Well, it couldn't be Johnny Keane, because he was managing the Yankees, so I guess they picked the team that finished in second place. And Mauch, of course, with the Phillies, but he had problems with Mauch, Howie. I found that funny. Let me hear. Go ahead.
Eddie wasn't the first player who didn't exactly love Gene Mauch. I mean, they had, meaning other players, issues with Gene throughout his career. But, Eddie was a strong, strong man, physically and emotionally. He had a great sense of humor. He was a pleasure to be around. I'll tell you one Eddie story you might not realize is that probably after 72, 3, 4, somewhere in there. After the season, the Mets went to Japan on a promotional tour. And when they got there, the traveling secretary for the Mets at the time, a man named Lou Nis, who was their original traveling secretary, said, "All right, everybody give me your passports. I'll hold on to them." And Eddie said, "Oh, no, you don't. You're not getting my passport. If something happens to them or it, then I'm stuck. I'm keeping my own passport." And that was a bone of contention between Eddie and Lou Nis. But anyhow, that promotional series began, and Yogi Berra, who was the manager, did not have Eddie in the lineup for the first game. Eddie went to Yogi and said, "Hey, I didn't come all the way over here to sit on the bench. If I'm not playing, I'm going home." And Yogi said to him, "Well, you can't go home. We've got your passport." And Eddie said, "Oh, no, you don't. I've got it." Eddie played from that point on.
That is good. That is an excellent one. All right, Howie, how about that big base hit against the Cubs in July? That was not the September series. In a big walk-off single in early July against the Cubs. You and I have talked about that 69 team an awful lot. I'm sure you remember. You may have been in the ballpark. Let me get some thoughts on that. Go ahead.
No, I was in a summer high school baseball league. I was in that year. I was in the ballpark the next night for Seaver's near perfect game. But anyway, that game you referred to on July 8th, 1969, was the first pennant race game the Mets had ever played in. It was the first time they could even sniff first place. They started the series with the first place Cubs at a packed Shea Stadium, 5 games behind Chicago. Ferguson Jenkins had not even allowed a hit. The game was scoreless going to the bottom of the 5th inning. And who gets the first hit for the Mets? Eddie. It was a home run. They led 1-0. But now you fast forward to the bottom of the 9th inning, and they're behind 3-1. They score 3 runs in the 9th inning, and fittingly, it was Ed Kranepool who had the game-winning hit, an opposite field single to left field that brought home the winning run. It had to be Eddie.
I know you tweeted it today, and I know the Met fan in your vintage and all Met fans, it's been a rough stretch. You've lost 4 Mets from 1962 this year. Howie, I didn't realize that many. I know Grody passed away. Thoughts there? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, 4 guys. Team. Yeah, 4 players from the 69 team, and then you throw in Willie Mays as well, who passed not that long ago. But if you saw the game, if you've talked about it last night in Toronto, the Mets were trailing 2-1 going to the 8th inning, and the Blue Jays absolutely gift-wrapped that game with one mistake after another, pass balls, wild pitches, walks, hit batsmen, all of that. And I had the feeling that, you know, when Eddie got up there, he probably grabbed a seat with Buddy Harrelson and Jerry Grody and Jim McAndrew, all of whom we've lost in the recent past, and said, you know what, let's whip up some of that old Met magic. And they did in the 8th inning as the Blue Jays handed them the game. And the Mets win a very important game in their pursuit of a postseason spot, taking the lead for the 3rd wild card over the Braves, who lost last night at home to the Reds.
All right, since you segue into that, 18 games to go. Mets, the 2 series against the Phillies, the 3 games in Atlanta. That's going to be huge with the tiebreaker, 2 at the head-to-head. Milwaukee at the end. That may not, it's not going to be anything for the Brewers. They're going to be the 3 seed, so they can determine who their opponent is in a wild card round. But as far as postseason positioning, most likely not. The Mets are in good shape right now. Their pitching has been superb. Atlanta can't hit. What's the scenario in your eyes here, Howie, down the stretch for this 2024 Mets team? Let me hear.
Well, for where they are right now, Chris, what you really have to be encouraged by is the fact that their starting pitchers, which by and large had struggled to give them even 5 innings over the first half of the seasons, are now not only good, but they're giving them length. I mean, they get 6 great innings from Tyler McGill in a pretty much last-minute assignment last night. He knew the day before that Blackburn wouldn't be able to make it. But, you know, they're getting 7 innings from Severino, 7 innings from Manaea, 7 innings from Peterson on a regular basis now. Those are your top 3. The strain on the bullpen was unsustainable over the first half of the season, but now the load is not as heavy as it was. So I think that in and of itself puts them in a pretty good position. Now, the last few days, the bats have cooled off somewhat, particularly Francisco Lindor's. He wasn't going to stay as hot as he was. Nobody would. So, I mean, that's just a little something to keep an eye on right now. The bat's cooling down a little bit. But I think their pitching has them in a much better position than it looked as though they'd be able to get to around midseason. And I feel real good about their chances.
Why not? And who knows? The Mets have a chance. They got that, as you said, 69. Maybe it rubs off on them. Howie, great job. Always a pleasure to talk to you. We'll keep you posted. Thanks for coming on today.